Welcome, everyone. My name is Aisha Abdullah. I am the Open Education Coordinator at SPARC, and I will be one of your facilitators today throughout this conversation. So just to provide some context and some background before we jump into our interactive part of this presentation, I wanted to let you all know that this webinar is organized by 3 networks. The first one is DOERS, Driving OER Sustainability for Student Success, which represents systems and state/province-wide OER initiatives. The second one is NCOER, the National Consortium of Open Education Resources, which represents the regional compacts and its member states, including US territories and affiliated states. And the last one is SPARC, which I'm a part of, which represents libraries. So we have facilitators today that represent all 3 of these organizations who are going to introduce themselves a little bit later. But like I said, I wanted to, before we get to that part, let you know as to why we're having these conversations and what kind of brought it about. So because of our complementary networks and work plans, we've been having conversations amongst ourselves on how to better coordinate. And this idea of a national strategy, and I use quotation marks because it's less about a strategy and more so about the need to effectively coordinate, not just amongst us as groups, but as a broader field. This idea just kept coming up in our conversation. So last year, our 3 groups organized a presentation at Open Ed 23. And if you were at that, welcome back. I was one of the facilitators there as well. And we discussed the challenges that the open education field faced. And from that conversation and talking with community members during that conference, it was very clear that there is both an interest and a need for a broader conversation to open this up and to open it up to everyone in the community. So I really want to hone in on the word conversation because that's purely what this is. It's just a conversation to learn more about what national strategy means to us. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So I want to also say that we really wanted to use the time today to build off of that conversation from our Open Ed 23 presentation and do some collective thinking on where the national strategy fits into the open education community, if it even fits in, and what exactly that means to us as a community. So this conversation is focused on the US higher education context, although we do welcome all perspectives. So if you're coming from outside of the US, we still very much welcome your perspective and your thoughts. So before we jump into the conversation, I just wanted to do some premise setting. The question, do we need a national strategy, is meant to be a very provocative question and is not something that any of us, any of the organizers have an answer to. And it's something that we're very interested in exploring together. And maybe strategy is not the right word. Like I said, maybe it's coordination, maybe it's something else. But that is the point of this conversation, is just to really explore exactly what that means to us as the open education community. The next thing is that all views are welcome. So if you are a hard yes, a hard no, a maybe, it doesn't matter. We very much so welcome your perspective. We welcome constructive criticism. We welcome the love, all of it. We are just very curious to have your open and honest thoughts. And this is a safe space for you to share really how you feel about this topic. And also, like what I was hinting at earlier, a national strategy can mean many things. And part of this conversation is exploring exactly what it means to our community. So with that being said, our agenda today is just to figure out who is in the room. We are going to be using Mentimeter today, which my colleague is going to set up with you all. And then we're going to have open-ended questions to get y'all's thoughts on this topic. And then the later half of this presentation will be breaking out into breakout groups, because we want to give a chance for people to unmute and really share their thoughts about this topic and their takeaways. So that will be the later half of this, and you'll have a chance to not just write out what you're thinking, but actually verbally say it to your facilitators. So with that, I want to pass it on over to my colleague who is going to set up Mentimeter.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Aisha. My name is Brad Griffith, and I serve in the role of Associate Vice Chancellor of Innovation for the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education, in addition to serving on the DOERS Steering Committee as the Capacity Building Work Group Chair, and really appreciate you all taking the time to be here with us today. If you would look on the screen, you can follow the instructions that are presented there to join us on Mentimeter. So 2 ways that you can access the dashboard where you'll be able to contribute your answers. You can go to menti.com and enter the code 21241548, or pull up your mobile phone and scan the QR code that you see right there on the screen. Haley's also dropped the link to the Mentimeter in the chat if you want to grab that there and enter your responses on your desktop. We do also invite you, if you're not able to access the Mentimeter for whatever reason, to go ahead and put your responses in the chat. We'll make sure that we can collect those as we move on through the conversation today. So if we can go ahead and advance, we do want to get a little bit of a lay of the land and figure out who has joined us today for this conversation, which is the third instance here. So go ahead and contribute your responses there. And again, the facilitators are here to review them as they come in, and we'll be happy to read along. So California and Colorado are hopping into the center here with good representation. We also have states like Virginia, Pennsylvania, Hawaii, and Florida. Iowa, Missouri, Arizona, very good. Again, Oklahoma, I know, is represented on here as well, even if it's not seen on the screen. We see Utah, Georgia, wonderful. Great representation again from across the US. The next question that you'll see displayed on the screen, what is your professional role? So we have a couple of librarians that are on the call, adjunct faculty. Thank you for being here as well. Very important part of the work that we do here. Academic deans, OER advocates, wonderful. Program managers, researchers, assistant director of centers for teaching and learning, wonderful. Instructors, compliance individuals, appreciate that. Instructional designers, once again, a very important part of any open education processes. Policy analyst, excellent. OER ZTC coordinator, that's a title and a role that I'd love to see. And president, thank you. All right, and the last one that's on here, how many years have you considered yourself part of the open education community? Full disclosure, I'm in the 3 to 5 year category personally. I see I'm not alone there. Looks like we have our pretty standard bell curve popping up. All right, so we definitely have some veterans. Again, appreciate the 4 of you that indicated 11 years or more as being part of this community. That's a wonderful period. And again, welcome to the newcomers as well. I'm really pleased to see the number of individuals who are newer to the open education movement that have been involved in this call, because I think that's an important part of sustaining our movement. And again, 12 people with the 3 to 5. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jenny, who's going to take us through the next questions.
Thank you, Brad. So this is the first of these that I've had a chance to attend, and already it's really exciting to see the range of folks. So thank you all for being here. My first question that I have for everyone is, what is the end goal you're working toward through open education? All right, student success, access for all, more student success. Higher ed, so a lot of access, a lot of success, promoting promising practices, equity, affordability, student voice, removing barriers. All right, and some of you are being very specific, like the majority of courses using OER or zero textbook cost, social justice, and materials and conversations, increase quality, paradigm shift, debunk the idea that you only get what you pay for. So let's see, moving faculty away from commercial textbooks, disciplinary literacy. Great. Well, we've got a nice range there. Okay. The next question, what are the greatest successes or strengths of open education? Culturally relevant materials, accessibility again, adaptability, yes, inclusion of student voices, access, free access, students see themselves in the work, Control of curriculum back to the faculty, yes. Belongs to everyone. Sharing resources. Community-led education. Localization, modification, increased engagement, a variety and multiple types of media, low or no cost, renewable assignments. Yes, student engagement, faculty engagement. All right. Well, once again, thank you for that. Oh, one more. Free in both the money and the liberatory sense. Yes, that's a very nice way to put it. All right. I think the next set of questions is Aisha's.
Thank you so much. So taking our last question and doing the opposite of it, we wanted to ask you all, what do you feel are the greatest challenges, threats, or gaps facing open education? Capitalism, that has shown up in all 3 webinars now. So definitely a huge thing that the community is feeling. Censorship, coordination, equitable access is also something we see. Automatic textbook billing has come up in all of the other webinars as well. Difficult to find collaborators, inclusive access again. Censorship, greed, inclusive access, automatic textbook billing. Yeah, that is a huge thing. We're doing the correct language on that and calling it what it is. I had to buy my books and they were expensive in the 80s too, so students now should have to buy as well. Yeah, that mentality that I had it hard, so you should have it hard as well. Lots of people doing the same thing but not working together. That is another thing we have seen, duplication of effort. Lots of duplication of efforts. Another thing that has been raised by a lot of community members, how do we lessen the duplication of efforts and eventually get it to a place where we aren't duplicating at all? There's so much to review and consider, and not everything is of the same quality, makes OER vulnerable to challenges by faculty. Absolutely. Listening, I can listen better to other views. Getting decision makers to listen. Apathy by administrators. Lots of great stuff for you all to share with us. And just so you know, you should be able to submit multiple answers. So don't feel the need to limit yourself to one. You can go ahead and submit as many as you would like. The more feedback is the better. Valuing what we measure instead of measuring what we value. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. Seems like states could collaborate better. Okay. So those concerns work perfectly for this conversation and to talk a little bit about the ways in which we may combat these challenges. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And this one is just on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being poor, 5 being very well. From your perspective, how well coordinated is a U.S. open education field? Interesting. So we have 2 as the main one. One person feels 4. A few feel very poorly. All right. I'm going to just give a couple more seconds for people to put in their ranking. And if you want to expand on in the chat as to why you feel like it is coordinated very poorly or why you feel like it's coordinated well or whatever in between, please feel free to expand. Like my colleague said earlier, we are going to be taking the chat as well and taking that input with us. So if you want to expand on any of your thoughts in the chat, feel free to, as well as in the breakout rooms later. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next set of questions and pass it on over to Brad.
Thanks, Aisha. So this is back to an open-ended question. What would transform your open education work? Funding, yes. Always is and usually should be the first answer. Yes. Administrative approval, dedicated staffing, time. And again, I think those are all tied together with the administrative value of the work that's required to proliferate good open education practices. Again, dedicated staffing, institutionalization. How do you build a strategy for open education for your institution? Time, again, political will, right. Administrative buy-in, buy-in again, retirements. I think that's an interesting one as well. Conversations about finding each other. I appreciate that one above all from some of these comments that I've seen. I think that that is one of the challenging things is how do we find everybody that is doing the work in this space and connect to one another with these overlapping outcomes that we're trying to reach? More long-term thinking, and I think that that's a large contributor of how this conversation has arisen about a national strategy, so be it. What does this look like if we want to build a ship that might sail together the same direction? Yeah, job descriptions and specific tasks. Again, that's another point of sharing, for institutions or consortia, state systems that have made this progress. How did you get there? What are the practices that you employed that we might be able to adopt? Finding a replacement for Twitter, I have to give a shout out again because this was discussed in prior conversations with different groups. The community seems to have lost its central focal point for collaboration and communication in the open space. What might that look like in the future? Right. Moving away from textbooks and towards teaching and learning. Again, that open education, open pedagogy, the engagement with learners and even outside partners such as workforce entities. Competing for faculty time, I think that that's an everlasting struggle these days. Faculty are asked to do more and more, to wear more hats, to provide more service to the institution, to do more research. Open education is not always recognized within that realm. Leading the future of education, again, how is it that open education might just completely flip the knowledge economy on its end? I think we have the power to do that. Excellent responses here. Continuing on in the different vein towards the national strategy discussion, now that we've discussed some of these struggles and successes of open education, what would a national strategy look like to you? And again, if strategy is not the appropriate word, we inquire, what does that actually mean to you? How would you define a potential coordination, collaboration, or strategy at the national level? Consistent avenues for funding, again. Standardized repositories of resources is an emerging theme that we've seen as well. A fair amount, I think, of duplication of work in some cases there. Everything national is a little scary right now, and I think that that's a great thing to bring up is that there are elements, for example, of national policies related to open education and instructional materials that may be in flux. Again, we are in an election year right now. Copyright reform, big conversations about that right now. Would like to see multiple strategies. I will, just share as a bit of feedback from the other conversations too, that mandates, again, I don't know, could be a part of this national strategy potentially. We do have to have the ability, I think, for individual organizations, states, groups to see themselves, in whatever that strategy may look like. Policies to help standardize bookstore treatment of open resources. I would love to see some developments there. I think that's great. Greater student representation. What does it actually look like if we begin to employ a student-first economy of higher education and perhaps using this as a starting point for it? Unfunded mandates are not useful. Could not agree more. We need to leverage AI. I agree with that. How is it that we explore this intersection of artificial intelligence and open educational resources? I think some of the organizing groups of these particular conversations will be addressing that as well. I love that. What is the world that we want to live in and then work backwards from there? I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. Is it my turn?
I think so, Jenny.
All
I have to
right.
get back to my list of questions.
It's going to be hard. That was very inspirational, that last one. All right. The next question, what priorities or objectives would you want a national strategy to achieve? Well, funding. Yes. Funding again. Oh, antitrust action. Nice. Efficiencies in messaging, policy, actually all kinds of things. Yes. Communication, collaboration, community building. Oh, incentivize enrollment and retention, SMART goals. Oh, make new mistakes. Don't replicate those you've already made. pushing back on inclusive access, yes. Repository using AI, standardizing the quality of OER, transparency, debunking myths and misunderstandings, K-12 higher ed connection. Yeah, we talk about that a lot in the work I do. Infrastructure for building a common mission, faculty training resources, and just better recognition of open education as a professional field. Elevate the value of teaching and learning, yes. Finding a shared vocabulary. Yes, bolstering the idea that universities can create their own learning materials and not depend on for-profit companies. Getting administrators on board. These are actually all really great goals. Thank you. Professionalization of the field. An open access journal on OER itself. Insourcing to build capacity rather than outsourcing. Public library participation. That's another thing we talk about a lot. Thank you. What wouldn't you want from a national strategy? Inflexibility, limits on academic freedom, mandates, lip service with no support. Or yeah, we'd be afraid that it'd be too broad and not have an impact. Wouldn't want it to be top down. Would not want imposed restrictions or rules, empty gestures. One org kind of taking over the great work of a number of others. A focus on state-funded institutions. So yeah, we wouldn't want the independents and other educational actors excluded. Unsustainable models. But over-focusing on only one goal rather than maybe the many goals that we might pursue through the use of open educational resources. Yeah, adjuncts need to have a say in this. Oh, huge topic. Yeah. A lack of vision, big personalities. You don't want big personalities dominating the conversation and the agendas. Turning over OER to commercial interests. Yes, that'd be very bad. Further politicization. No buy-in from those of us on the ground and especially students. Yes, you don't want that distance between the efforts and the planning and the folks who are doing the work and hopefully receiving the benefit of it as well. Not enough awareness that that national level work is happening. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So I have the next couple questions to run you all through. So the first one is, what could a community-driven process to develop a national strategy look like, and who would need to be involved? So like I said earlier, remember you can submit multiple answers. So if you want to just answer the first half and then answer the second half, I'm really interested to see what you all would say needs to be involved in this process. Involve students. Yes, of course, we've heard that. We heard that our past couple meetings. Community colleges. I am a community college alum, so absolutely agree. Students with disabilities, educators, K through 12. Yeah, I was in a breakout room the other day with a K through 12 rep, and we've been seeing that a lot, to not leave K through 12 behind. So very important to have them part of the conversation. Lots of conversations like this. Yes. Continuing these conversations, understanding that this is just one part of many steps that would need to be taken if anything comes out of this. Public libraries, regional clusters of higher ed educators that convene, then national convenings. Open Ed Conference had a good process. Yeah, so we can definitely take inspiration from other organizations, other conferences, whatever the case may be, when it comes to building whatever this may be. Include libraries. Of course, we cannot do it without the libraries. That would be silly to even think about. Instructional designers to address accessibility concerns. Love that point. Consortia, a series of funded forums with lots of different groups. Everyone has a voice. I like that. Thinking of ways we can engage different people. Share back insights garnered from smaller groups. Absolutely. Materials are second to national understanding about effective teaching methods. Getting outside the echo chamber. Absolutely. How do we make sure that we're not just surrounding ourselves with like-minded people, but actually bringing in genuine, diverse perspectives that will push this to be better than it is? We can't just hear the same things from the same people, because that is not how growth happens. So absolutely agree with that point. Include museums, registrar's office. Okay, looks like the responses are slowing down. So I'm going to go on over to the next question. Now we're almost at the end. So one of the questions I have for you all is, do we need a national strategy for open education? And like I said in the beginning, there is no correct answer. Please be honest and share how you feel. And we are going to be exploring this point more deeper in our breakout rooms, but wanted to give a chance for you all to answer now. So seeing a good mix of yes and not sure yet, not seeing any no's yet. Just going to give it a little bit more for people to put their answers in. And it's absolutely okay to be in the not sure yet. I think a lot of us are in the not sure yet. So it's important that we all figure this out together. All right. I'm going to pass it on over to Brad to wrap it up with our final questions.
Thank you, Aisha. And while you're changing the Minty slide there, I do want to give a shout out to Rebel's comment in the chat. One of the outcomes potentially of a national strategy could be better support of legislation to address inclusive access at the federal level. So thanks very much, Rebel, for that. So last two questions that we have, one of them being, if we don't need a national strategy, what do we need? And if, again, you may be one of the people that doesn't think we need a national strategy, I do also want to provide the option of just listing status quo is fine if you feel that way. But again, please let us know what you're thinking here. So more conversation and stronger networks. I think that that is something that's been synthesized across all of these conversations, is better communication and coordination at minimum. Again, that results in better support also, I think, at our individual state levels, recognition of this field for the profession that it is. Absolutely. Collaboration, clear communication, again, coalitions of organizations, which we may even already have. Again, we just have them, I think, occurring at different levels within different contexts. A large mental map of these efforts, I think, would be helpful for many of us, even on this call. Better communication across institutions and the K-16 educational environment. Completely agree there. Support systems for open education practitioners. I will share with you all from Oklahoma's perspective, we have a lot of institutions that are under-resourced here. So how can we leverage, for example, resources collaboratively to support those that may deal without? Lobbyists for funding. I think that's a great suggestion. Again, professionalism of this field, recognizing it for what it is and the level that it sits at. Something like the OER world map, who runs that now? I'm not sure if anybody might be able to provide a response in the chat to that, but feel free if so. And the final question on the Mentimeter before we transition, anything else you all would like to say in this conversation? These could be comments, thoughts, or even questions that you feel that we should be addressing as the conversations continue. What might be the Twitter replacement? And I have appreciate as well Molly dropping in the chat there that she has some Blue Sky invitation codes if anybody might want them. I know in previous conversations we heard mentions of Mastodon as a potential platform. But again, that's also fine. Yeah, meant for the last question. And Blue Sky is now open to all, apparently. Rebel also recommended LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think, is a good professional environment. Don't see a whole lot of open ed activity on there, but I see a fair amount that's noticeable. And thank you all for your kind comments on there and for your time and contributions in the conversation. I can't tell you all, particularly as somebody that works with the DOERS organization, how helpful this information is going to be as we decide what our future looks like. Whether there's a big coalition of groups that kind of form together as one, or we continue doing what we're doing, this information will be so helpful. Yeah, and again, we do have an old model of higher education, and I think open education is one of the ways that we're going to advance this to the future. It's like I mentioned earlier, we might have a chance to really flip what this knowledge economy looks like and who gets to be involved in it at the end of the day. And again, I appreciate that remark there too. Thinking beyond just this 2- and 4-year structure, particularly for higher education or technical education, what does it look like to address the lifelong learner? We absolutely will have individuals that keep needing to come back to us and depend on educational structures to learn, with quality content. National conference, I think, again, highly encourage you to keep an eye out for the Open Education Conference that's coming up. Very excited to be back in person for that. And again, lots of changing regulations and potential impacts that are going to arise with that as well, depending upon how things like the negotiated rulemaking turn out.
All right, thank you so much, Brad, for wrapping us up. So we are now going to transition to the second half of this webinar, which is breakout rooms, and breakout rooms are completely optional. So if you do not want to join a breakout room or not in the mood to talk, no pressure to join one. If you want to join one and not talk and just listen, that is completely okay too. So we are going to break out into 3 breakout rooms. We're going to have the facilitators identify themselves and just going to go around the room and introduce yourself and share your thoughts on the idea of a national open education strategy and just whatever other thoughts that came out of this conversation and what you're thinking on this topic. So thank you all so much for your input thus far, and I'm excited to see what comes out of the breakout rooms.